Hi, thank you for coming to our interview.
You're welcome.
What is your name?
My name's Pat McCaffrey.
Hi, Pat. So, how'd you get to Cape Cod?
Well, we moved here when I was 11 in sixth grade. So I grew up here in Yarmouthport. Went to DY High School, graduated in 1990, and left for several years, military and different jobs, and came back in 2000. Here I am.
Why did you join the military? Was there any inspiration from someone?
My father was in the Army, but I don't think that was it. I graduated in 1990. I did a year at Four Seas. I was not a good student. Didn't enjoy it. I think maybe I had some growing up to do. But I was always inspired to serve. I think I knew I wanted to be a police officer a long time ago. And that, these are very similar things, service and being subordinate. I liked sort of regimented lifestyle, uniform things, and I like to challenge myself, so I chose the Marine Corps over all the other branches of service.
What did your family think of you joining the military, or your friends?
Everybody was very supportive. I did it without telling my parents, so it wasn't a good thing. I went off to the recruiter, I signed a contract, came home, told my father that I signed for 4 years in the Marines. He would have rather me sign for a couple in the Army or something, but they didn't have any choice but to be supportive after that.
Why didn't you tell your parents until the last second?
I don't know. I think I was a very impetuous kid. I didn't think things through all the time. I've got a son who just graduated from boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp, who did pretty much the same thing. Said to me one day, "I'm going to enlist," and then kind of just went and did it. He's very similar to me, so I don't think I had a plan. I didn't intentionally, not inform them. I just did it.
Did your father ever tell you stories about his military that ever jolted you to say, I want to join?
No, he was drafted, so he didn't. There was no passion for service from him. So he was drafted. He was in a communications unit, I think. He was in Germany for a bit, so I knew he traveled a little bit, but I don't think he really enjoyed his time. Again, it was a day and age when they made you enlist. You can imagine.
Now, once we're finished with the early life of the interview, we should probably get into the military.
Sure.
Where was your training base?
Every Marine goes to Parris Island, South Carolina, if you're east of the Mississippi. If you're west of the Mississippi, everybody goes to Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. So I was in Parris Island for basic training or boot camp. It's about 13 weeks. Then you get to come home, and then you go back to Marine Combat Training, which is Camp Geiger, North Carolina. And then for me, since my job was infantry rifleman, I went off to Camp Lejeune School of Infantry for several months. And then my training, I think actually after that, I went to Chesapeake, Virginia for a more specialized training in security forces. So it was probably, a year before I was done with my initial training.
Right when you joined the military, did you know that you wanted to be a Marine from day one, or did you just join it?
Yeah, I never considered anything other than the Marines.
Describe a day in your training.
Well, it was all different. I mean, it depends on where, what phase or what your specialty is. I mean, in boot camp, it's so crazy and chaotic, and you wake up whenever they say wake up, and you are off and running, and you're, kind of playing games. You're getting dressed by the numbers, which means the drill instructors are telling you to put your right leg in your right pant leg, and if you don't do it quick enough, everybody takes them off. You do it again. So you're really getting indoctrinated into that subordinate role of following orders, and it's a lot of nonsense. So boot camp is crazy hectic. After that, with the infantry, there's more classroom stuff. You'll sit around and do land navigation, compasses and maps, a lot of rifle training, a lot of hand-to-hand combat training. Just at your specialty schools, that's really what it is. They're teaching you how to fight and how to navigate through, how to get from point A to point B and fight and then leave, basically.
Did you make any friends during your boot camp or training days?
Oh, yeah. Lifelong friends, probably not, because it's such a transitional assignment. I found myself on several bases in 4 years, so I'd make great friends and then leave them. They'd leave me, and and your active service at different times, you know, where I joined in February of '92, maybe my best friend joined in, you know, June or something, so I'm leaving 6 months before him, and you know, it's just, yeah, I ended up in California too, with a lot of California guys, or West Coast guys, and when I came home, I lost contact with just about all of them.
Did you retain any of them without?
I mean, I could, you know, I could reach out and talk to one guy, Pat McCaffrey, actually was probably my closest friend. I mean, I could reach out and talk to him any time, and we would talk, but just so that we don't find, I don't find time to do it. Probably should. You trying to make me feel bad?
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Why were you in California?
Well, yeah, it's just the story's long, so
You can start from the beginning.
yeah, I know, you got time to kill. It's, you know, after boot camp and your specialty training in the infantry, and then I went to Chesapeake, Virginia for even more specialized training to be part of a security force company, and I went to Panama for a year and a half. We protected a jet fuel tank plant in the middle of the jungle. In order to do that, you had to have even more training. I was also on a close quarter battle squad, is what it's called, which is a lot of handgun training extra. I guess would be like what you guys would think the SWAT is. That was my job down there for a year and a half. After that, it's a year and a half, they hand you orders. You're going to rotate into the regular infantry. So I did my year and a half of specialized job, and then they sent me out to Camp Pendleton, California to pick up with 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. So, and because in Panama, so I did a good job when I was younger. I would interview well, I would win the Marine of the Quarter awards a lot, and they would give you, it was just like a contest to see who the best Marine out of the company was. And that would involve, you know, answering a lot of knowledge questions about infantry tactics, questions about weapons. Then you'd have a physical fitness test, and then you'd have, you know, maybe a uniform and appearance piece of it. So they would give you little rewards if you won. So I won, and one of my rewards was to go to helo rope suspension training school. This all sounds real boring as I say it, but it's basically having people rappel and fast rope out of helicopters and up buildings and things. So they sent me to that instructor school. I can't stand heights, hate them to this day. So they thought the big reward they were going to give me, something I love, would be put me on top of a tower and a helicopter. So that's what I ended up doing a lot. I won Marine of the Quarter again, and they thought the reward I would like would be to go to jump school. So I did that. I went to jump school with the Army. Terrifying. You know, me and about 5 Marines out of the whole company were getting trained with Army guys at Fort Benning, Georgia. So when I left Panama, all that is just to get to this. When I left Panama, they knew they were going to have to assign me to a helo company because of all this training that they gave me. Again, the last thing I wanted to do. So they sent me out to California with 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, and a helo company, Echo Company.
Are you still afraid of heights?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not comfortable with it. You know, I mean, if I got to go up something, I'm not crazy about it, but I'll do it. You know, like clean my gutters out, I'm all right. I'm not that, you know, not that scared. Jumping out of planes is a little different than cleaning gutters.
Did you have any intention of joining the military, straighten out your life?
It was really, really knee-jerk. I, you know, graduated. I started going to 4Cs. I, you know, started seeing my buddies doing nothing, hanging around. You know, the kid that worked at the gas station was still working at the gas station. You know, and I just thought there's got to be some better plan for me. And again, really hasty. No, when I was a kid, I didn't think I was going to be a Marine.
Where were you deployed?
So after Panama, I ended up at Camp Pendleton, California. Then you start training to get ready to deploy, which means you're going with your whole unit somewhere else in the world. So we were a special operations capable company, which is a lot of extra training, a lot of that rope suspension training and stuff, which is why I was assigned to that company. Ended up flying out to Okinawa, Japan, training more there, and then getting on the USS Bellawood, which was a LHA, I think they call it, landing. It's like a step down from an aircraft carrier. Harrier jets and helicopters and stuff. And from there, we floated, we call it, up to, I've been to Thailand, Singapore. I think that's it.
What was the boat like? Was it?
It's horrible. Yeah. So the Marines are on there just for a ride. You know, if you're a sailor, you've got a job. Your days go by quickly. You're the cook. You cook food. You're the mechanic. You maintain the mechanics on there. But as an infantry Marine, you're on this ship in the berthing area, which is the living quarters, for a ride, and you're crammed in there. You're playing cards all day. You're just trying to pass the time. The worst part was the bunks. The bunk above you was on your nose. You know, you got to slip into like this coffin and go to bed every night. So the ship was not, I was not a fan of the ship.
Did you serve during any times of war?
I was lucky enough I went in after the Persian Gulf and came, you know, maybe Somalia was going on. I didn't go. I missed some stuff with my deployment to Panama for a year and a half, which was still a low intensity conflict, they called it. A lot of protesting about the Panama Canal Commission, and I think Noriega had been ousted out of Panama a few years earlier, so they weren't happy with us. Again, that's why we're down there to protect fuel tanks that were, you know, fueling our vehicles.
About the fuel tanks, what is it like a day of defending a fuel tank?
I never even saw them, so I don't, you know, I just knew there was an area. You know, you knew maybe a day in advance that I would take my squad out and we'd patrol. So you'd wake up and you'd have a meeting, a 5-paragraph order meeting, a SMEAC meeting is what they called it, where you kind of, everything's very precise. You know, you have to talk about the situation, the mission, the execution, the admin and logistics of it, who's in charge of it, and we'd come up with kind of tactically how we wanted to get from point A to point B. Basically, we're in the jungle looking for anybody that might be in the woods trying to mess with our stuff. So, and the jungle's not like you see on TV. It's 100 times thicker. It's a brutal environment. I mean, the worst. So your land nav had to be spot on. You can't sort of look and say, we're going to walk to that, you know, hilltop. You've got to really have compass in hand and machetes. You've seen that on the movies. So it would take us a whole day to traverse, you know, a quarter mile of jungle probably, and then, you know, mark where we ended. The next squad would have to come in and kind of pick up that thing and just move about. So that was a day in the life on patrol, and if you weren't on patrol, we had sentry duties, which were terrible. You'd have to sort of sit in a room for 4 hours, making sure, you know, in a box with a boom to make sure no cars that didn't have a pass would come through, something like you'd see at maybe our base or like a gate guard. I liked my time in Panama. I liked all the patrol stuff.
Who were the people that would try to mess with their fuel tanks?
I don't really know. There was the Panamanian, Noriega, who was a dictator down there, had a group of real loyal servicemen, I think is what it was. I really should have paid more attention to the history, but I think, you know, the Marine Corps does such a good job in preparing you to just go fight when they say go fight, that you don't really, I never worried about the politics of it. I never thought about whether anything was right or wrong, or even who we're looking for. I just knew that we better not find anybody or they're in big trouble. So that's it.
So a little overview before we dig in deeper into your travels around the world. What are the places you visited during your time of service?
Yeah, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, California, Japan, Singapore, Thailand. I think we ported in Korea at some point, but didn't get off the ship. So I think that's about it.
Where was the favorite place you ever deployed?
I really liked the base in California. It was in Oceanside, California, about an hour north of San Diego. So it was, you know, just a nice vacation spot. But I really liked my job in Panama. That was the most challenging, exciting, scary, probably.
What was it like in Singapore?
We stopped there for about a week. It was about the cleanest place I'd ever seen. You know, when you're traveling there, you have to have classes where they're teaching you what is socially acceptable and not. And as we all know, Singapore is a pretty strict environment. That's where they, cane people. They whip people with. That's their punishment. You know, you go in front of a court and they say you're going to get hit with a cane 6 times for, I don't know what, spitting on the side. I mean, they told you things like there's no spitting, no profanity. Vandalism is a very serious crime out there. So they had us very prepared to behave very appropriately. So when I got there, the place was spotless. Everybody was extremely polite. I thought it was affordable. Singapore was very nice.
Did you ever see someone being whipped in Singapore?
No. I think it's like I think it's a closed environment thing. I don't really know. We just knew that it was, if you got in trouble, the justice system is a lot more strict than we would have it here. Now that was Singapore. Thailand, on the other hand, that was Pattaya Beach. Thailand was craziness. I think anybody that ever goes there, that's fun for a 20-year-old guy or 19-year-old guy to pull into. It's just they cater to. Pattaya Beach wouldn't exist if it weren't for sailors and Marines coming in there. So you're really treated well, and people are happy to see you. It's like a big party for the time that you're there.
What was the longest day you ever had overseas?
The 18-month. I mean, if you call Panama overseas, that was an 18-month stint. I think I didn't come home for 14 months. I got one vacation out of there, and then the deployment's generally 6 months at a time. So, for 2 years out of my 4-year contract, I was out of the country.
So you traveled to many places.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the reason you traveled to every place, or was it just stops along the way to a main destination?
Yeah, when we were on ship, we didn't really even know where we were going until they would kind of sit you down and say, listen, we're going to port in Singapore, and this is what you need to know about Singapore. But every time we went to some place, Thailand, I was a member of what's called a TRAP team, Tactical Recovery of Aircraft and Personnel. So my job, because I had all that helo rope suspension training and jump school training and stuff, was to go in with a crew on a helicopter. And Thailand's a jungle environment too, so most likely we'd have to, put personnel in there through fast rope or rappel because you can't land the helicopter. And then we would get on the ground and then have to find a aircraft that was shot down, try and get recordings and any intelligence out of that thing so an enemy wouldn't have it. So that's what we trained for. Every time we ported, me personally, we would get in a helicopter, fly into an area, we'd exit the helicopter, patrol to a certain point, pretend that there was a downed aircraft. You'd have to disable the aircraft, gather all the intelligence, and get back to where you're going to get picked up, and then extract it.
What was it like being part of the TAC team, and was there ever any real-life situations when you actually had to recover down there?
No, very fortunate. I was very fortunate that there wasn't. It was the TRAP team. It was a lot of extra training. So, again, at the time, you don't sit around, complaining or thinking about how great it is. I mean, you're waking up every day and there's a new piece of the training, and it's practice. These days I coach football, and so that's really all it is. The harder you practice, which should be harder than a game, your practice, is the way the Marines go about these things. They're going to put us into these awful, terrible situations and environments, and hoping that when it comes real life, it's easier than what we practiced. I liked it. I liked my job.
What was it like not knowing where you were going on the ship?
I don't think I was concerned with it. I knew I wasn't coming home for 6 months, so they could have sent me anywhere. It wouldn't have bothered me.
What was the hardest place you visited?
Well, definitely the worst environment was Panama. The toughest ground to get through, the toughest climate. The minute you get off the plane and out of the airport, you're sweating, and you don't stop sweating until you leave 18 months later. And for some reason, 8 months out of the year, it rains at like noon for 2 hours every day. So you're wet. It's just and the jungle. The environmental threats out there, snakes and spiders, and just, there's a lot of things to be concerned with.
Was there a certain course you knew you were set to take on the ship that traveled around the world?
No, they kind of, I think the training was designed by our superiors that, they would fit as much in as they could. I mean, there wasn't always classroom type stuff on the boat either. You'd really have to fend for yourself. You'd wake up, go eat breakfast, and then work out a lot. You run on the flight deck, or you lift, and then maybe you have lunch, and then you play some cards, and then maybe that day they'll pull you into a room and talk to you about where you're going, or land navigation courses. I think that's for the infantry riflemen. I bet the civilians don't realize how important that is. Reading maps and compasses.
You mentioned that you could retain one friendship over training.
Yep.
Did you have any friends that you still retain over the years that you were
No,
on the ship?
and really, Pat McCaffrey is a guy that after we ended our service, I ended up working for the Border Patrol out in Chula Vista, California, and he was a San Diego sheriff's with the sheriff's department. So, had I not ran into him in California as a Border Patrol agent, where he was a sheriff's deputy, I don't know if we would have maintained a relationship after the Marine Corps. Anyhow, you just sort of go your separate ways.
What was the hardest part of your deployment?
Well, I guess you're always homesick, so that, was never a concern. I mean, like physically demanding, to me the thing I will probably never forget is sitting in the helicopter, flying a pattern over the ship, getting ready to land it. Again, I hate heights, and I had to go up every time the thing would go up. So I'd sit in there, say the rosary beads, I'd be praying. And these machines are, beat up, Vietnam era helicopters, and you just sort of hold a pattern above the ship, waiting your turn to land it. And every time you landed on the ship, it felt like, the rotor wash would hit the superstructure on the ship. It felt like it was going to throw you into the water. So every time you hit ground, you're just thanking God. A helicopter did go overboard while I was on the Bellawood. I think it was just the crew that was on it, and everybody lived, but the helicopter was at the bottom of the ocean somewhere.
Did you have any expectations joining the military compared to what they'd actually meant?
No, everything exceeded my expectations without a doubt. When I enlisted, the recruiter, I was probably the easiest recruit to get to sign the paper, because he asked me what I wanted to do, and I didn't even know what he talked. I didn't even know there were jobs. Like, you could be a postal clerk in the Marine Corps or something. You could be supply, the guy that hands out underwear and stuff. You could be an armorer, just working with weapons. I just thought Marines went and fought. So he asked what I wanted to do, and I said, I don't even know what that means. He said, okay, sign me up for infantry rifleman, and away I went. So my expectations were what I'd seen on movies and things, that you were just going to go fight somewhere.
What surprised you the most about the military?
Surprised me? Again, with such little expectation, I'm not sure I was surprised. Like, I had prepared myself for really being in an awful, awful place, so I don't think anything surprised me.
What is an infantry rifleman, and what do you do?
You're the guy, you're what you see in a movie, just it's you and your rifle and you fight. You're the first line that goes in. You might have, within a rifle squad, you'll have a fire team that is has a machine gun. You'll have guys that are just carrying their M16s. You'll have guys that are carrying mortar tubes. And so you're the guy in the trench fighting.
What type of gun did you carry?
We had the M16A2. I think it's changed now to something else.
Were you ever in an altercation with an enemy that you
No.
had to kill anyone or
No.
shoot?
No, very fortunate, no.
Could you ever imagine having to take a life?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I'm a police officer today, so these things are considered all the time. But the Marine Corps has it's a system that's been in place since, you know, the 30s. That this regiment and how they prepare Marines to go fight, and you know, a big part of it is not sitting and processing emotionally how you feel about these things. They have a very important mission to make young men not think about things like that. So I consider myself extremely fortunate that I didn't have to, because who knows what that does to you today. Post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff, we deal with that on the street. So yeah, I was very fortunate, but I can guarantee you this, as a young man, I never sat and thought about what it would be like. You're almost excited to go. You're almost excited to go use all this training that you've been given somewhere.
How did your life change after the military?
Oh, I wouldn't do what I am doing today if I didn't have it. I know that. I was, you know, a late bloomer. I was a bad student. I didn't like school. I didn't have any direction. Again, I knew I wanted to be a police officer, but I was not going to go get a degree at college. So, but since I mean, the way my life went was the Marine Corps enlistment. Right after that, I worked for the U.S. Border Patrol out in Chula Vista, south of San Diego, and then after that, came home, and my job as a Dennis police officer. So none of that would have been possible without the Marine Corps.
What was being a border patrol person like? Where is it, near Mexico or Canada?
Yep, Mexico. Chula Vista is, I think San Ysidro, California is the second largest port of entry in the world, meaning more people pass through that. So whenever you see a movie with those lanes of people entering Mexico and coming from, that's where I was stationed, just to the west of that, in Chula Vista. It's a very, it's kind of a sad job. I mean, I've detained and arrested thousands of people. I only did it for 2.5 years. But now that you want to talk about expectations, from coming from Massachusetts to the southwest border, I didn't even know we had an immigration problem. And you know, after that academy and getting there, it's overwhelming. I mean, there'd be 50 guys. We'd arrest, you know, 1,000 people in a shift. It was crazy. Not any place you stick around either. It was 2.5 years of running around.
Now that you're an expert on immigration problems, do you support Donald Trump's idea?
What is his idea? That nobody can come?
To ship out illegal immigrants in the country, to build a wall,
No.
and then legally re-enter them into the country.
I don't. I'm not an expert on immigration, but I'll tell you this. If any of us found ourselves in Mexico, and any of us found ourselves trying to be the provider we want to be for our family, all of us would be trying to jump a fence or cross a border to support your family. Now, what I do know Donald Trump says is I think that what he probably meant was, let's be smart about this. You know, let's be a little more cautious and careful about who's coming.
How is life different when you came home? And did your father welcome you, or did they ever notice a change in you?
Oh yeah, it's a significant change. I noticed it in my 19-year-old after 13 weeks. You know, you stand a little taller, you speak a little more polite. You just are. You've got some pride that, you know, not many people get to experience. You know, after completing the things I've completed, you get to feel good about yourself, and you can definitely see that in anybody, really.
Now, after telling us your story about your deployment and military life, would you ever do it again?
I wouldn't change a thing. Yeah. No, and I mean, I don't have any regrets about my deployment. I don't ever feel like I wished I did something, or ever feel like I need to, you know, embellish or anything either. A lot of veterans feel like they need to talk about things they may not have done. I don't. I feel like I served my country, and I enjoyed everything I did, and it wasn't easy. And but again, accomplishment.
Would you ever go back now at this day?
43 years old? No. As a young man, I'm sure I would have signed the contract again. You know, and really, I think Marines that are signing up today, a lot of these young men aren't sitting around thinking about what conflict they might get themselves into, or if this is a dangerous time or something. They want to go serve, and they want to challenge themselves. So, you know, you're gonna enlist anytime.
Should other people enlist into the military?
Yeah, I mean, a certain type, you know, it's, one thing that people say, and it kind of, I don't agree with it, is, you know, you're gonna go to school or you should enlist or something. It doesn't really work that way. You have to have a passion. To go through the things that the Marine Corps are gonna put you through, you'd better be passionate. Or a couple things are gonna happen. You're gonna be a bad Marine, you're gonna be discharged as a Marine. Now, you wanna talk about changing somebody's life, the difference between coming out of the Marine Corps with an honorable discharge and one that says you got kicked out is gonna ruin your life. You'll have to explain that forever. So if you're gonna enlist, you better have a passion to serve.
You mentioned that your son has recently graduated from boot camp. Do you support his training?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went down there. So 23 years later, I was down on Paris Island to see him graduate. And the place smelled the same, looked the same. I mean, the drill instructor sounded the same. All the Marines are recruits just about to graduate. I remember the feeling of getting out of there. Yes, I support him. And I'm sure the follow-up would be, do I worry about him? And of course I do. You know, but he was a lot like me. And he got accepted into college. He's going to go to Southern Vermont College and play baseball. But I think I would have worried more about him up at school than I do in the Marine Corps. My mother tells me that the first good night's sleep she got was when she got a call from Paris Island saying, we have your son. Well, it's kind of the feeling I have. Somebody's looking after him. Nobody's going to let anything happen to him. He's government property for the next 4 years. So they protect their own.
Thank you for coming and letting us interview.
You're welcome.